Hello to each one of you. Now, I hope you have seen the first explanation video in which we did about 5 pages of this 14-page PDF of this rather long story by Roald Dahl. So we stopped at this stage where Knipe says that it's a matter of business because obviously Mr. Bohlen was not convinced that this is going to be a commercially successful idea. So he was a little circumspect. Circumspect means he was a little doubtful about, while the idea may sound good on paper, in terms of generating business, in terms of generating money, it would not really take off. So now Knipe seems to understand what is it that Mr. Bohlen is thinking about. So he says it's a matter of business, that's all. I'm looking at it from your point of view. So Knipe is now being a little smart. He says, I'm looking at it from your point of view. Your point of view is to make money also on whatever, whenever you're coming up with a business idea, obviously it has to generate some revenue for it to be kind of successful, reach out to more people, generate money so that you can put more money into the business so that you can make your product even better. As a commercial proposition, please remember this phrase which you can use in your answers, because finally it does turn out to be a successful commercial idea, commercial proposition. Commercial proposition means as a business prospect. Now let's go ahead. My dear boy, it can't possibly be a commercial proposition ever. You know as well as I do what it costs to build one of these machines. So what Mr. Bohlen is saying, that the cost that will be incurred, the cost which they will have to spend, the money that they will have to spend in order to develop one of these kind of machines, they will never be able to recover even that cost by publishing books. So that's why he's a little doubtful about the commercial viability. In fact, that's another phrase you can use in your answers. Commercial viability. It again means whether it makes business sense to launch a project like this. What do they pay? Anything up to $2,500. It probably averages around $1,000. Okay, so he says you do not know how much money magazines actually pay to writers for writing original stories. You have no idea, Mr. Bohlen. So he says, what do they pay? He says they pay at least $2,500. $2,500 is what they pay per story. So he says it's a lot of money. Mr. Bohlen jumped. So you can make out from his reaction two things. He was ignorant about how much money they paid, and number two, he was obviously excited at the amount which was being paid. So if you get a reasoning question, let's assume why Mr. Bohlen jumped on hearing what Mr. Knipe said about the money which is paid to writers, because he did not know that they paid $2,500 per story, right? Yes, sir, it's true. Absolutely impossible, Knipe. Ridiculous. No, sir, it's true. You mean to sit there and tell me that these magazines pay out money like that to a man for just for scribbling of a story? Good heavens, Knipe. Whatever next? Writers must be millionaires. Whatever next means that, oh, what is it that you're going to tell me next? Because he's saying, he's not believing what he's saying. He's hearing from Knipe that, people magazines pay $2,500 for a story, for just, as he says, and he's very dismissive, for just scribbling of a story. Scribbling is not even writing. Scribbling is just writing unintelligent stuff, stuff which is not easily read. So he says, now what will you tell me next? Writers can be millionaires, must be millionaires. That's exactly it, Mr. Bohlen. That's where the machine comes in. Listen a minute, sir, while I tell you some more. I've got it all worked out. Okay, that is, I have done all the calculations, is what he's trying to say. The big magazines are carrying approximately 3 fiction stories in each issue. Each issue is each edition of the magazine. Now, take the 15 most important magazines which are published, the ones which are paying the most money, which is this $2,500 per story. A few of them are monthlies. Okay, but most of them come out weekly. That is every week, every day of the, a particular day of the week. It could be Saturday, it could be Sunday when it would hit the stands. All right, that makes us, let's say, around 40 big stories being bought each week. Each issue carrying three stories, and there are a few of them which come out every week. So he calculates there are about 40 big stories which can be published in all these different magazines. That's $40,000, and with our machine, when we get it working properly, okay, we can collar nearly the whole of this market, right? So 40 into 1,000, he's kind of averaging it. He's not even thinking of 2,500. He's thinking of a lower sum of money, but even there he says it could translate to $40,000 for 40 big stories. My dear boy, you are mad. No, sir, honestly, it is true what I say. Don't you see that with volume alone, we will completely overwhelm them, because we will generate so much of volume with the help of this machine, because it will not take the amount of time that a human being will take in order to write the stories. It will be able to generate stories because of the plot memory, because of the word memory, much faster, and that will ensure that we are able to generate that much more stories. So when he's talking about the volume, he's referring to the volume of content that they will be able to create. This machine can produce a 5,000 word story, all typed and ready for dispatch in 30 seconds. Now, to give you an idea, I don't have the book right now in this room. Now, for instance, the biography of Saina Nehwal that I wrote, that was, if I remember right, something like 57,000 words. Okay, 57,000 words. Of course, with a lot of research, etc., that I had to do, it took me close to 5 to 6 months to write and, of course, edit, proofread, everything. It was a 6-month long project, right? 55 to 57,000 odd words. I'm just giving you an idea so that you get a comparative idea. What Naip is saying is that this machine can produce a 5,000 word. 5,000, let's assume that he has to write a 55,000. So, or let's say 11 such copies. If he's taking 30 seconds to produce one 5,000 word copy, he's all going to take is to kind of add another 11 copies and multiply it by that much, right? So in a matter of a few minutes, he will be able to produce that many stories. So how can the writers compete with that? I ask you, Mr. Bohlen, how? The speed and the volume that they would be able to generate and put into the market. At that point, Adolf Knipe noticed a slight change in the man's expression, an extra brightness in the eyes, the nostrils distending. Now, obviously, he's a little excited about the idea. Distending means the nostrils swelling. Okay, the whole face becoming still, almost rigid. Quickly, he continued. Nowadays, Mr. Bohlen, because he realized quickly, he continued. Why? Why did he continue quickly? Because he realized that his words were having an impact on Mr. Bohlen, and he did not want to lose that moment before he comes back or reverts to his original position of saying that no, it's a bad idea. While he seems to be getting convinced, because of all these changes in his facial expressions, he wants to strike when the iron is hot. Okay, so nowadays, Mr. Bohlen, the handmade article hasn't a hope. It can't possibly compete with mass production. It's an important keyword. Please use it in your answers. Mass production, because that's what Knipe is going to do with this machine. Mass produce content, material, which will completely flood the market, so that the writers who write by hand will never be able to compete with the machine. Especially in this country, you know that carpets, chairs, shoes, bricks, crockery, anything you like to mention, they're all made by machinery now. So what he's comparing is a literary and a creative work with something which is like a machine produced stuff, like carpets, like chairs, like shoes, like bricks, like crockery. He's kind of putting them all. He's comparing apples with oranges in that sense, because books are a creative work. You need time, you need thought, you need to come up with plots, you need to have the right vocabulary, you need to have the right expression, everything. It's just like when you write an essay. Can you compare the same? It's like, anything which is, even cooking for that matter, is a creative process. It's not just like, you put this and it'll be okay. The taste of your mother's cooking would be different from the taste of your aunt's cooking, right? Even if they are using the same ingredients, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a creative process, right? So he's kind of comparing them with things which do not have any kind of creativity. Though I would admit that, let's say, if you are making something like chairs, there would be some element of creativity required there also by the carpenter, right? But it is not at the same level as that of writing a book, which is much more mental exercise, which is much more intellectual in its output, right? Anything you like to mention, they're all made by machinery now. The quality may be inferior, but that does not matter. It is the cost of production that counts. So what he's saying, he's talking like now, like a businessman, that how much effort you put in, you need to quantify that in terms of money. That if I am putting in 2 hours of work, how much does that translate to in terms of my money? How much would I have made otherwise? So that's what he's trying to quantify, the cost of production. And stories, well, they are just another product. So he's now looking at stories as just a product. He's not looking at it as an because he has seen that he wrote 566 stories. None of them found a taker, even though he believed that they were good quality stories, right? He now is looking at stories as just a product, pretty much like shoes and bricks and carpets. So he says that they are just another product like carpets and chairs, and no one cares how you produce them so long as you deliver the goods. We will sell them wholesale, Mr. Bohlen. We will undercut every writer in the country. We will corner the market. So we will sell them cheaper than what another writer will sell it at, because the writer will put the effort for what he's doing, right? Another person, what he's doing, let me give you another kind of a comparison. This guy is pretty much like a thief. What he's doing is to take the plots from different places, the words from different places, just putting them together into the machine, and the machine is producing the output. Whereas a writer will originally think of a plot, he will think of how to structure the characters, he will kind of work around and play around with his words and vocabulary and the construction of his sentences and chapters. So it is a creative process. So if he says that I will charge $2,500 per story because there is a lot of my creative process which has been involved, he's justified. This guy is nothing but like a thief who is just stealing content from other plots, and just putting them together and letting the machine do the rest, right? Which is why he can afford to sell it at cheap, and because he will be mass producing, which will translate into volume. So that is the game he wants to play. It makes me think of a lot of other people who are doing something similar these days. Mr. Bohlen edged up straighter in his chair. He was leaning forward now, both elbows on the desk. So it shows, what does it show? It shows it's an expression of interest. The face alert, the small brown eyes resting on the speaker. I still think it is impracticable, Knight. 40,000 a week, cried Adolf Knight. And if we halve the price, making it 20,000 a week, that's still $1 million a year. And softly he added, you didn't get any million a year for building the old electronic calculator, did you, Mr. Bohlen? So he says this is commercially a better prospect than your calculator. But seriously now, Naib, do you really think they would buy them? Listen, Mr. Bohlen, who on earth is going to want custom-made stories when they can get the other kind at half the price? It stands to reason, doesn't it? Now, what is he saying? Custom-made stories is, I want to read a certain kind of stories, which are, it's like, let's see, there used to be a story called Quality, which is now part of the, earlier it used to be part of the 12th class syllabus. Now, that used to be about making shoes of high quality. Okay. Now, which are custom made, they are made for my feet. Obviously, you will have to pay more because you are kind of, you're ordering them for your own personal use. It's not for the market, right? So stories which are written for you will also have that kind of a USP. It will have that X factor. Here is saying, मैं mass produce करता हूँ. मैं mass produce करता हूँ, low quality, but which everyone can read. Why won't they read? When they're getting it for much cheaper. So it's that kind of a business idea that he is coming up with. It stands to reason means it makes reason, it makes sense, doesn't it? How will you sell them? Who will you say has written them? We will set up our own literary agency and will distribute them through that, and we will invent all the names we want for the writer. So you see, jhoot pe jhoot, in the sense that he says we will invent the names. That Tom Sawyer wrote this particular novel. There is no Tom Sawyer, but he's invented a name. I don't like it, Naib. To me, that smacks of trickery. So Bohlen is being honest, at least at this stage. He says that looks like cheating. Another thing, Mr. Bohlen, there is all manner of valuable byproducts once you've got started. Take advertising, for example. Beer manufacturers and people like that are willing to pay good money these days if famous writers will lend their names to their products. Why, my heavens, Mr. Bohlen, there isn't any children's plaything we are talking about. It's big business. This isn't any children's plaything we are talking about. So he says this is big business because once you get started, you can get advertising. People will be willing to advertise if there are some big names writing for you or appearing to be writing for you. Then they will all want to be associated with you in terms of advertisements. Don't get too ambitious. And he says this is not some toy things that we are making. Don't get too ambitious, my boy. And another thing, there isn't any reason why we shouldn't put your name, Mr. Bohlen, on some of the better stories if you wish it. Now he's trying to throw a lollipop. He's kind of adopting the carrot policy, because Mr. Bohlen also has, everyone likes to see their name in print. I can tell you the first time I saw my name in print, and I can tell you the date, it was an article which I wrote for the Indian Express, 22nd of August, 1990. When you see your name in print for the first time, it's a huge kick. You get very happy with, seeing your name in a newspaper in print by so and so. So he's kind of playing on that weakness. He says, my goodness, Naib, what should I want that for? I don't know, sir, except that some writers get to be very much respected, like Mr. Eric Gardner or Kathleen Morris, for example. We have got to have names, and I was certainly thinking of using my own on one or two stories just to help out. He's trying to say that I can do that. I can lend my name also. A writer, Mr. Bohlen said musing. Well, it would surely surprise them over at the club when they saw my name in the magazines, the good magazines. So he's already kind of, imagining that his name has come in print, and how at the club people will see his name in that in a magazine, and they would be rather surprised. That's right, Mr. Bohlen. For a moment, a dreamy, far-away look came into Mr. Bohlen's eyes. He's imagining, he's fantasizing, and he smiled. Then he stirred himself and began leafing through the plans that lay before him. One thing I don't quite understand, Naib, where do the plots come from? The machine cannot possibly invent plots. We feed those in, sir. That's no problem at all. Everyone has plots. There is 300 or 400 of them written down in that folder there on your left. Feed them straight into the plot memory section of the machine. So 300 to 400 different plots that he already has. He says feed them into the plot memory section. The machine will take care of the rest. There are many other little refinements too, Mr. Bohlen. You will see them all when you study the plans carefully. For example, there is a trick that nearly every writer uses of inserting at least one long, obscure word into each story. Something which is like a very longish and a tough word. This makes the reader think that the man is very wise and clever. So I have the machine do the same thing. There will be a whole stack of long words stored away just for this purpose, which can be used as synonyms. Instead of a simple word, use a very complicated word. Where? In the word memory section. In the word memory section. So he's trying to kind of, make it that this machine can actually do that much more. Okay. So through most of that day, the two men discussed the possibilities of the new engine. In the end, Mr. Bohlen said he would have to think about it some more. The next morning, he was quietly enthusiastic. Within a week, he was completely sold on the idea. Sold on the idea means he was completely taken in. He was convinced that हम ये कर सकते हैं. This can be a good business proposition. What we will have to do, Naib, is to say that we are merely building another mathematical calculator, but of a new type. That will keep the secret. So let people think that you are making another mathematical calculator that everyone knows that we are doing. Exactly, Mr. Bohlen. And in 6 months, the machine was completed. It was housed in a separate brick building at the back of the premises. And now that it was ready for action, no one was allowed near it excepting Mr. Bohlen and Adolf Knipe. It was an exciting moment when the two men, the one short, plump, revived. What is revived? Revived means having short legs. Okay, it's a new word for me. I've written the meaning, but I don't remember. The other, tall, thin, and toothy, stood in the corridor before the control panel and got ready to run off the first story. Now, revived is the kind of word. It's not an usual word, but it is something which has been thrown into the story. I mean, it's not a very commonplace kind of word for somebody having short legs. You generally would say short. In any case, he has used the word short. So in that sense, it's a repeat, but he's talking specifically of someone having short legs. Stood in the corridor before the control panel and got ready to run off the first story. All around them were walls dividing up into small corridors, and the walls were covered with wiring and plugs and switches and huge glass bulbs. They were both nervous. So this is the setting of the place. They were both nervous, Mr. Bohlen hopping from one foot to the other, quite unable to keep still. So he's kind of, being very edgy. When you are edgy, your body language shows that you are a little nervous. Which button? Adolf Knipe asked, eyeing a row of small white discs that resemble the keys of a typewriter. You choose, Mr. Bohlen. Lot of magazines to pick from: Saturday Evening Post, Collier's, Ladies' Home Journal, anyone you like. So what I was saying just about 5 minutes ago, basically taking stuff from other things and making it appear it's your own. Okay, reminds me of someone in particular. You just steal from other places and then make it pretend that, I'm the boss, I'm the superstar out here. Goodness me, boy, how do I know? He was jumping up and down like a man with hives. Hives is a skin allergy. Okay, Mr. Bohlen, Adolf Knipe said gravely, means seriously, do you realize that at this moment, with your little finger alone, you have it in your power to become the most versatile. Versatile means someone who is multi-talented, multifaceted writer on this continent. So he's trying to, Mr. Bohlen ko maska mar raha hai, buttering kar raha hai, that, you can be so great, you can be a big name and everyone at the club will praise you and stuff like that, right? Already Mr. Bohlen is imagining all that. Listen, Knipe, just get on with it, will you please, and cut out the preliminaries. So he wants to he's excited, he wants to see the product. Okay, Mr. Bohlen, then we'll make it. Let me see this one. How is that? He extended one finger and pressed down a button with the name Today's Woman printed across it in diminutive black type. So that's the font size. There was a sharp click, and when he took his finger away, the button remained below the level of the others. So much for the selection, he said. Now here we go. Okay, so now we are ready to get started. So he says, he reached up and pulled a switch on the panel. Immediately the room was filled with a loud humming noise and a crackling of electric sparks and the jingle of many tiny, quickly moving levers. And almost in the same instant, sheets of quarto paper began sliding out from a slot to the right of the control panel and dropping into a basket below. So this is essentially the process being described. They came out quick, one sheet a second, and in less than half a minute, it was all over. So as he said, 30 seconds is all the machine would need. The sheets stopped coming. That's it, Adolf Knipe said, cried. There is your story. They grabbed the sheets and began to read. The first one they picked up started as follows, and it's all mumbo jumbo. They looked at the other. The style was roughly similar in all of them. Mr. Bohlen began to shout. The younger man tried to calm him down. It's all right, sir. Really, it is. It only needs a little adjustment. We've got a connection wrong somewhere. That's all. You must remember, Mr. Bohlen, there is over 1 million feet of wiring in this room. It happens, right? You can't expect everything to be right first time. It will never work. So Mr. Bohlen is the pessimistic kind of person, and Knipe, because it's his creation, he's very positive that he would make it happen. It will never work, Mr. Bohlen said. Be patient, sir. Be patient. Knipe set out to discover the fault, and in 4 days' time, he announced that all was ready for the next try. It will never work. I know it will never work. Knipe smiled and pressed the selector button marked Reader's Digest. Then he pulled the switch, and again the strange, exciting humming sound filled the room. One type of TypeScript flew out of the slot into the basket. Where is it? It has stopped. It has gone wrong. No, sir, it hasn't. It's exactly right. It's for the digest, don't you see? Which means a shorter story. This time it began, but you see, there is no spacing between the words. It's gibberish. No, sir, it's fine. Can't you see? It's simply that she's not breaking up the words. That's an easy adjustment. But the story is there. Look, Mr. Bohlen, look, it's all there except that the words are joined together. And indeed, it was. On the next try, a few days later, everything was perfect. Even the punctuation. The first story they ran off for a famous women's magazine was a solid, plotty story of a boy who wanted to better himself with his rich employer. This boy arranged so that the story went for a friend to hold up the rich man's daughter on a dark night when she was driving home. Then the boy himself happening. This is a story which is being told, not very important from in the overall context of the story. Then the boy himself happening by knocked the gun out of his friend's hand and rescued the girl. The girl was grateful, but the father was suspicious. He questioned the boy sharply, etc., etc., etc. Okay, I'm not going through the entire story. It's tremendous, Mr. Bohlen. It's exactly right. Seems a bit sloppy to me, my boy. No, sir, it's a seller, a real seller. Mean to say that it will do very well. The readers will like this kind of a story. The publisher, the magazine editors and publishers will also like it. In his excitement, Knipe promptly ran off 6 more stories in as many minutes. All of them, except one, which for some reason came out a trifle lewd. Lewd means vulgar, seemed entirely satisfactory. Mr. Bohlen was now mollified, means that now he was calm. He was mollified means he was now satisfied that this machine is capable of delivering some reasonably decent stuff. He agreed to set up a literary agency, which would represent authors, and a literary agency, what happens is that if you're a first-time author, what you do is that you contact a literary agent, and there are many of them in India for sure. So you contact a literary agent. The literary agent goes through your work, and he or she has contacts with many publishing houses. So he would be able to advise you that your kind of book would be picked up, is more likely to be picked up by X publisher. Y publisher publishes other kinds of books. He or she may not be interested in this. So he kind of navigates you. He kind of supports you. He presents your work to that particular publisher, and because he's already having some kind of an association, some kind of a relationship with that particular publishing agency, he's able to push your book in order to for it to get published, and for that he gets a particular commission. That's how a literary agent or an agency works, just for you to understand. In an office downtown, and to put Knipe in charge. In a couple of weeks, that was accomplished. Then Knipe mailed out the first dozen stories. He put his own name to 4 of them, Mr. Bohlen's to 1, and for the others, he simply invented names. So you realize that this guy is a bit of a crook in the sense that he doesn't think too much about the right thing to do. He's okay with it. Invented name invent kar diya, kya farak padta hai kind of thing. So just like he's writing fiction, he's inventing names for the writers as well. 5 of these stories were promptly accepted. Okay, so how many did he send? He said first dozen stories. So out of 12 stories, 5 stories were accepted. The one with Mr. Bohlen's name on it was turned down with a letter from the fiction editor saying this is a skillful job, but in our opinion, it doesn't quite come off, means it's not very convincing, it kind of doesn't work. We would like to see more of this writer's work. Knipe took a cab out of the factory and ran off another story for the same magazine. He again put Mr. Bohlen's name to it because he wants to see more of the writer's work. He again, so to make it seem that he's a very prolific writer, someone who writes a lot, he again put Mr. Bohlen's name to it and mailed it immediately. That one they bought. So you see this whole charade that he's working, charade as in CHARADE, in the sense that, it's a falsification of facts, a complete set of false facts that is presenting to the world outside of magazines, and they are not able to see through it. Okay, the money started pouring in. Knight slowly and carefully stepped up the output, and in 6 months' time, he was delivering 30 stories a week and selling about 15 of them, selling half of them. So that was bringing in a whole lot of money. He began to make a name for himself in literary circles as a prolific and successful writer. So did Mr. Bohlen, but not quite such a good name, although he did not know it. At the same time, Knight, whose 566 stories were rejected, when he wrote them himself, now that the machine was writing and he was just putting his name, those stories were getting accepted. What does it show? That the quality of the machine was perhaps a little better than what Knight himself was writing, right? Because he was using the output of all the others which are already there available, right? The plot memory and the word memory. At the same time, Knight was building up a dozen or more fictitious persons as promising young authors. Everything was going fine, right? He was kind of, with all those invented names. At this point, it was decided to adapt the machine for writing novels as well as stories. So not just stories, but let's also write novels. Now, as I said, a story may be 5,000 words. A novel may typically go upwards of 50,000 words. So at least 10 times the size, or it could even go up to about 80,000 words. Mr. Bohlen, thirsting now for greater honors in the literary world, he wanted a bigger name, insisted that Knight go to work at once on this prodigious task. So basically saying that this kind of an important kind of a work, he should get on it immediately. And something which can make a name for itself. I want to do a novel. He kept saying, I want to do a novel. And so you will, sir, and so you will. But please be patient. This is a very complicated adjustment I have to make. Everyone tells me I ought to. So he's already, thinking I ought to do a novel. Kambak to ye nahi malum ki wo to ek word bhi nahi likha. Likhta koi aur hai, he's just putting his name. Okay, so you see, they are kind of, taken in by, they are convincing themselves that they are writers. At least Mr. Bohlen, that I am a short story writer. Now I want to write a novel, even though he's not writing even one single word of the output. So he says all sorts of publishers are chasing me day and night, begging me to stop fooling around with stories and do something really important instead. A novel is the only thing that counts. That's what they say. We are going to do novels, and I told him just as many as we want, but please be patient. Now listen to me, Knight. What I'm going to do is a serious novel, something that will make them sit up and take notice. I've been getting rather tired of the sort of stories you have been putting my name to lately. As a matter of fact, I'm none too sure you haven't been trying to make a monkey out of me. Basically, making a monkey means that making someone humiliate someone by making them appear ridiculous. Okay, so he's suspicious that, the kind of stories that you have been putting my name, I'm not particularly liking those stories. So, मुझे शक हो रहा है कि तुम मेरे को एक तरह से you are making a monkey out of me, basically saying that you are insulting me by making me do ridiculous kind of stuff. A monkey, Mr. Bohlen, keeping all the best ones for yourself. कि अच्छे stories को तुम अपना नाम देते हो, बेकार वालों को मेरा नाम देते हो. Oh no, Mr. Bohlen, no. So this time I'm going to make damn sure that I write a high-class, intelligent book. You understand that. Now you see the irony of this. If you get this kind of a sentence, and then you say, explain this. So, Mr. Bohlen has started to believe that he's the one who's writing the stories, whereas he knows that he's not writing even a single word. So, they are kind of consumed in their own lie. They have begun to believe that their lie is actually a truth. You see, a creative process is supposed to be unraveling. It is supposed to be a quest for truth. Even when you're creating characters, there is a lot of you yourself in those characters. You create them, right? It is a very truthful kind of a journey. Whereas here, what they are doing is that they are kind of so consumed in the lies that they are propagating, that they believe that that's the truth. So he says, with the sort of switchboard I'm bringing up, you'll be able to write any sort of book you want, Mr. Bohlen. And this was true, for within another couple of months, the genius of Knight had not only adapted the machine for novel writing, but had constructed a marvelous new control system which enabled the author to pre-select literally any type of plot and any style of writing he desired. There were so many dials and levers on the thing, it looked like the instrument panel of some enormous aeroplane. So now he kind of made the machine even better, that people could actually think that, okay, this is the kind of novel I want to write, and they could actually achieve something like that. pre-select any kind of plot and any style of writing. So if I want, let's say, a suspense thriller kind of writing and a plot to suit that, I would be able to pre-select it, right? So it's almost like, वो गर्ल्स का होता है ना, मिक्स एंड मैच करने का, so it's a bit like that, you are mixing and matching and seeing, okay, what goes well with what. First, by depressing one of the stories, one of the series of master buttons, the writer made his primary decision. One second. Historical, satirical, philosophical, political, romantic, erotic, humorous, or straight. Then from the second row, the basic buttons, he chose his theme. Army life, pioneer days, civil war, world war, racial problem, wild west, country life, childhood memories, seafaring, the sea bottom, and many, many more. The third row of buttons gave a choice of literary style, classical, that is old style, whimsical, whimsical means, a little wicked kind of a thing, racy, like Ernest Hemingway or James Faulkner or James Joyce, feminine, etc. The fourth row was for characters, the fifth for wordage, and so on and so on, 10 long rows for pre-selector buttons. But that wasn't all. Control had also to be exercised during the actual writing process, which took about 15 minutes per novel. And to do this, the author had to sit, as it were, in the driver's seat and pull a battery or push a battery of labeled stops as on an organ. So, he's kind of creating the imagery of an extremely complex kind of a machine. By so doing, he was able to continually modulate or merge 50 different and variable qualities such as tension, surprise, humor, pathos, mystery. So, each and every sub-element he was able to introduce into the novel. Numerous dials and gauges on the dashboard itself told him throughout exactly how far along he was with his work. Finally, there was the question of passion. From a careful study of the books at the top of the bestseller list for the past year, Knipe had decided that this was the most important ingredient of all, a magical catalyst. Catalyst means almost like a masala that somehow or the other could transform the dullest novel into a howling success. Howling means, which will scream. At any rate, financially, to also get in a lot of money. But Knipe also knew that passion was powerful, heady stuff, and must be prudently dispensed. That you need to be careful with using any kind of element of passion. The right proportions at the right moments. And to ensure this, he had devised an independent control consisting of two sensitive sliding adjusters operated by foot pedals similar to the throttle and brake in a car. One pedal governed the percentage of passion to be injected. So he's kind of, ऐसा थोड़ी होता है यार. I mean, he's making it almost a little ridiculous, But I guess these days, when computers can write books, possibly this can happen. But the way he's kind of describing it, almost with the foot pedal, you can insert how much of passion to be inserted. It's not some experiment which is being conducted in a chemistry lab. Anyway, similar to the throttle and brake in a car, one pedal governed the percentage of passion to be injected, the other regulated its intensity. There is no doubt, of course, that this was the only drawback, that the writing of a novel by the Knipe methods was going to be rather like flying a plane and driving a car and playing an organ all at the same time. So that's the similarity. It's almost like flying a plane or driving a car or playing an organ, right? But this did not trouble the inventor. When all was ready, he proudly escorted Mr. Bohlen into the machine house and began to explain the operating procedure for the new wonder. Good God, Knipe, I will never be able to do all that. Damn it, man, it would be easier to write the thing by hand. You will get used to it, Mr. Bohlen. I promise you, in a week or two, you will be doing it without hardly thinking. It's like learning to drive. Well, it wasn't quite easy as that, but after many hours of practice, Mr. Bohlen began to get the hang of it, means he began to get comfortable with it. And finally, late one evening, he told Knipe to make ready for running of the first novel. So he took that much time to get used to the machine, what to press, how much to press, when to press, in order to get the certain amount, the required amount for a particular X element to be injected into the story, the plot of the novel. It was a tense moment, with the fat little man crouching nervously in the driver's seat and the tall toothy knife fussing excitedly around him. I intend to write an important novel, Knife. Now look at it again. I mean, this is how he thinks novels are going to be written. Well, I'm sure you will, sir. I'm sure you will. With one finger, Mr. Bohlen carefully pressed the necessary pre-selector buttons. Master button was for satire. Then subject, racial problem. Style, classical style. Characters, 6 men, 4 women, 1 infant. Length, 15 chapters. At the same time, he had his eyes particularly upon 3 organ stops marked power, mystery, profundity. You know, the style of the particular novel. Are you ready, sir? Yes, sir. I am ready. Yes, yes, I am ready. Knife pulled the switch. The great engine hummed. There was a deep, whirring sound from the oiled movement of 50,000 cogs and rods and levers. Then came the drumming of the rapid electrical typewriter, setting up a shrill, almost intolerable clatter, means the sound which was being created. Out into the basket flew the typewritten pages, one every 2 seconds. But what with the noise and the excitement and having to play upon the stops and watch the chapter counter and the pace indicator and the passion gauge. Passion gauge means how much a gauge is to measure, right? So how much of passion is to be introduced into the story. Mr. Bohlen began to panic. He reacted in precisely the way a learner driver does in a car, by pressing both the feet both hard down on the pedals and keeping them there until the thing stopped. Okay. गाड़ी सिखाते वक्त होता है ना टेंशन. Congratulations on your first novel, Naib said, picking up the great bundle of typed pages from the basket. Little pearls of sweat were oozing out all over Mr. Bohlen's face. It sure was hard work, my boy. But you got it done, sir. You got it done. So just imagine, almost like he has driven a car, he has created and written a novel. I'm finding it very amusing. Let me see it, Naib. How does it read? He started to go through the first chapter, passing each finished page to the younger man. Good heavens, Naib, what is this? Mr. Bohlen's thin purple fish lip was moving slightly as it mouthed the words. His cheeks were beginning slowly to inflate. But look here, Naib, this is outrageous. I must say it's a bit fruity, sir. Fruity means it's a little, over the top, because it is there's too much of passion that he has injected into the novel. Fruity, it's revolting. I can't possibly put my name to this. Quite right, sir. Now, is this some nasty trick you have been playing on me? Are you playing tricks on me? Oh, no, sir. It certainly looks like it. You don't, Mr. Bohlen, think that you might have been pressing a little hard on the passion control pedal. So you have put more passion, which is why the novel is looking a little more than fruity, right? How should I know? Why don't you try another? So Mr. Bohlen ran off a second novel, and this time it went according to plan. Within a week, the manuscript had been read and accepted by an enthusiastic publisher. Knight followed with one in his own name, then made a dozen for good measure. In no time, Knight's literary agency had become famous for its large stable of promising young novelists, and once again, the money started rolling in. It was at this stage that young Knight began to display a real talent for big business. See here, Mr. Bohlen, he said, we have still got too much competition. Why don't we just absorb all the other writers in the country? Okay, now in the last 2 pages, we will see what is it that they are planning from here on. Absorb means, let's make them all part of our literary agency, that they would write only for us and we would represent them before all the publishing houses. Mr. Bohlen, who now sported a bottle green velvet jacket and allowed his hair to cover 2/3 of his ears, was quite content with things the way they were. Don't know what you mean, Mr. You can't just absorb writers. How can we do that? Of course you can, sir. Exactly like Rockefeller did with his oil companies, simply buy them out. So he's saying that if we offer a particular price to a writer, the writer, because now he or she will not have to make the effort of writing the thing and still be able to see his or her own name on the novel, they would kind of buy into the idea. They would they would accept the proposal. If they won't sell, squeeze them out. Means, make it difficult for them to survive as writers. Careful now, Naib, be careful. I've got a list here, sir, of 50 of the most successful writers in the country. So what he's doing, listen to this carefully. What he's doing also is now he's almost being like a mercenary, in the sense that, if you're not coming to me, I will make it difficult for you to survive as a writer. So he's kind of, being very ruthless in his approach. I'm giving you an option. You can make money, we can make money, you lend your name, and we will all make money together. But if you don't, I will make it difficult for you to even survive. So he's being very ruthless in his approach. If they won't sell, squeeze them out. This is the explanation for that. I've got a list out here, sir, of 50 of the most successful writers in the country. And what I intend to do is to offer each one of them a lifetime contract with pay. All they have to do is undertake never to write another word. And of course, to let us use their names on our own stuff. How about that? They will never agree. So he says this is the proposal that Knipe has in mind, which he wants to offer to the writers. They will never agree. You don't know writers, Mr. Bohlen. You watch and see. What about the creative urge? It's bunk. All they're interested in is the money, just like everybody else. In the end, Mr. Bohlen reluctantly agreed to give it a try, and Knipe, with his list of writers in his pocket, went off in a large chauffeur-driven Cadillac to make his calls. He journeyed first to the man at the top of the list, a very great and wonderful writer, and he had no trouble getting into the house. He told his story and produced a suitcase. You may get questions on the reactions of the writers, so please pay attention to this part. He told his story and produced a suitcase full of sample novels and a contract for the man to sign, which guaranteed him so much a year for life. The man listened politely, decided he was dealing with a lunatic. Lunatic means a mad guy. Gave him a drink, then firmly showed him to the door, asked him to get out. The second writer on the list, when he saw Knipe was serious, actually attacked him with a large metal paperweight. Okay. And the inventor had to flee down the garden, followed by such a torrent of abuse and obscenity as he had never heard before. So he got abused and almost assaulted by the second writer. But it took more than this to discourage Adolf Knipe. But Knipe was not someone to get discouraged so easily. He was disappointed but not dismayed. Dismayed means he was not kind of taken aback. He was disappointed, but he was not completely down, ki kuch nahi ho sakta hai. And off he went in his big car to seek his next client. This one was a female, famous and popular, whose fat romantic books sold by the million across the country. She received Knipe graciously, gave him tea, and listened attentively to his story. So the first two writers, he did not get the right reaction, but the third writer, he seemed to get a more positive kind of response. It all sounds very fascinating, she said, but of course I find it a little hard to believe. Ma'am, come with me and see it yourself with your own eyes. My car awaits you. And off they went, and in due course the astonished lady was ushered into the machine. So she's only the third person who gets to see the machine where the wonder was kept. Eagerly Knipe explained its workings, and after a while he even permitted her to sit in the driver's seat and practice with the buttons. All right, he said suddenly, you want to do a book now? Oh yes. So she was very excited. She was very competent and seemed to know exactly what she wanted. She made her own pre-selections, then ran off a long, romantic, passion-filled novel. She read through the first chapter and became so enthusiastic that she signed up on the spot. That's one of them out of the way. Knipe said to Mr. Bohlen afterwards, a pretty big one too. Nice work, my boy. You know why she signed? Why? It was not the money. She has got plenty of that. Then why? Knipe grinned, lifting his lip and baring a long pale upper gum. Simply because she saw the machine-made stuff was better than her own. And this is pretty true even for Knipe. Knipe had written 566 stories. None of them got published. She realized that even this particular work which was being produced by the machine was better than the work that she herself produced. That's what Knipe believes. Thereafter, Knipe wisely decided to concentrate only upon mediocrity, which means anything better than that, and there were so few it did not matter much, was apparently not quite so easy to seduce. Seduce as in to kind of get them to sign up and become part of his literary agency. So he thought if he is able to kind of sign up for authors who did not write as well as the machine, it would be easier. Okay, so he's trying to use the same template. In the end, after several months of work, he had persuaded something like 70% of the writers on his list to sign the contract, which is a huge number. He found that the older ones, those who were running out of ideas and had taken to drink, were the easiest to handle. The younger people were more troublesome. They were apt to become abusive, sometimes violent when he approached them, and more than once Knipe was slightly injured on his round. So similar to what happened with the second case, second writer. But on the whole, it was a satisfactory beginning. This last year, the first full year of the machine's operation, it was estimated that at least one half of all the novels and stories published in the English language were produced by Knipe upon the great automatic grammatizator. So this is important, that one half, 50% of the novels was produced by the machine. Does this surprise you? I doubt it. And worse is yet to come. And now Roald Dahl is writing about himself. Today, as the secret spreads, many more are hurrying up to tie up with Mr. Knipe. And all the time, the screw turns tighter for those who hesitate to sign their names. This very moment, as I sit here, this is Roald Dahl speaking, as I sit here listening to the howling of my 9 starving children, he has got 9 children who are hungry and they're howling in the other room, I can feel my own hand creeping closer and closer to that golden contract that lies on the other side of the desk. So Knipe has approached Roald Dahl also, and the contract is lying on his desk. Should I sign it? Should I not sign it? If I sign it, I will be able to take care of the hunger of my 9 children. If I don't, they will continue to be hungry. Give us strength, O Lord, to let our children starve. So Roald Dahl believes that he will never sign the contract. So he says, give us the strength, O Lord, to let my children starve, but I will not sign the contract. I will not go this way of the machine like that lady and 70% of all the writers on Knipe's list had done, right? So that brings us to the end of this longish 24-page long story. I hope it is clear. Please look at the notes, and of course following which the question and answers and everything. And I think we'll be able to deal with it. It's not a complicated story, but the themes are interesting and also challenging for you to write about. But as I said, if you are able to use a lot of keywords, and there are a whole lot of adjectives which have been used for both Mr. Bohlen and Knipe, you should be able to deal with it. Okay. Thank you very much. Tata, bye bye. I'm very tired.